Welcome to today's deep dive. It's been really interesting going through all the articles you sent in about autism.
Absolutely. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, it's clear that you're ready to kind of go beyond those surface level discussions, and we are here for it.
We are, and you've given us some really great material to work with. So I'm excited to kind of ditch those old labels and really dive into some of the complexities.
Yeah, and hopefully offer up some new insights into this world. One of the things that immediately struck me going through these articles was this emphasis on the word spectrum itself. Like, it's not just about having or not having autism.
Right. And it's interesting because one source even compared it to eyesight. Some people, they have that perfect 20/20 vision. Other people, they rock those stylish glasses, and then some need a little more support.
Right.
Autism's very similar. It's not like one single point. It's a whole range of experiences.
Yeah, it's not one size fits all.
Yeah. Exactly. Each person is going to be unique. They'll have their own strengths, their own challenges. And, that's why that professional diagnosis is so important, right? It's
Yep.
not about labeling. It's about saying, okay, what are your specific needs so we can give you the right kind of support?
Absolutely. And speaking of labels, one source I thought was really interesting talked about this whole allistic versus neurotypical discussion. And I have to admit, before this deep dive, I wasn't even familiar with the term allistic. So can you kind of break down what the distinction is there?
Yeah, and it's all about language,
Right.
right? And how we categorize differences. We hear neurotypical a lot, which kind of gets used as that default.
Right.
And so then anyone who doesn't fit that mold is somehow different.
Yeah, it kind of creates this weird us and them thing.
Exactly. Allistic levels, that playing field. It just means not autistic.
Yeah.
So we're acknowledging there's multiple ways our brains can be wired, not one better than the other, just different.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Uh-huh.
We're talking neurodiversity here.
Absolutely.
So not viewing autism as something to be fixed, which actually a few of these sources touch on this idea of an autism cure. Some of them even going as far as claiming that religious intervention can make it go away. What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I think it's incredibly damaging. Imagine being told you need to be cured just for being who you are.
Right. Yeah.
Autism is not an illness. It's a fundamental aspect of a person's identity.
Yeah, it's like trying to cure someone's personality. It just doesn't quite work that way.
Exactly. And those attempts, whether it's praying it away or using other unconventional cures, it can be not only ineffective, but it can be seriously harmful.
So instead of trying to change who someone is, the focus should really be on understanding and acceptance.
100%. And part of that understanding is recognizing that these old terms, high functioning, low functioning, they're really outdated and misleading.
I was curious about that because I've heard those terms used, but these sources seem to suggest they're not very helpful. Why is that?
Because they're way too simplistic. You could have someone who's labeled high functioning. Maybe they hold down a job, but internally they could be dealing with intense sensory overload or social anxiety that other people aren't seeing.
So they don't tell the whole story.
Exactly. Or you could have someone who's labeled low functioning who has these amazing artistic talents or understands a certain topic really deeply, but those strengths get totally overshadowed by that label.
It's like we're trying to take these incredibly complex human beings and we're trying to stuff them into these tiny little boxes. And it just doesn't work. We lose sight of the individual.
Exactly, and their unique strengths. Which brings us back to that spectrum, right?
Right.
Autism presents so differently from person to person, and it's about understanding those individual experiences, not forcing people into these limited categories.
It's like we can finally hit that zoom in button
Yeah.
and really start to appreciate the incredible diversity within the autism spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing that really jumped out at me going through these articles was this whole topic of sensory sensitivities. It feels like that's something that often gets overlooked.
It's crucial, though, to understanding autism because for a lot of people, it's not just about being picky or oversensitive. It's literally that their sensory processing works differently.
Right.
Try to imagine, experiencing the world with the volume turned way up or the brightness constantly on high.
Wow. Yeah. That puts it into perspective, like a flickering light that, to me might be mildly annoying, could be completely overwhelming for someone with sensory sensitivities.
Exactly. So for some folks, they're going to be hypersensitive to those loud noises, bright lights, certain textures, even strong smells. And it's not just about avoiding those things. It's that constant anticipation,
Right.
the anxiety that can come with having to navigate a world that's full of these potential triggers.
Yeah. So it's not just the sensory input itself. It's the mental and emotional energy that it takes to cope with it.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have hyposensitivity, which is where you're craving that intense sensory input. So, needing to touch everything, maybe seeking out those loud noises or really strong flavors.
Interesting. So you can have both ends of the spectrum there,
Yeah.
which really highlights the need to create these environments that are sensory friendly,
Hmm.
not just, at home, but also when we're thinking about public spaces and things like that.
Oh, for sure. Public spaces can be really challenging. And there are tools that can be helpful, like noise canceling headphones or those weighted blankets,
Right.
fidget toys. It's about finding what works for each individual.
Yeah, absolutely. So sensory processing is this huge piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
What other challenges do these sources kind of highlight for us?
Well, communication difficulties are another big one. And again, it's a spectrum, right? So for some, it might be difficulty understanding those social cues, the nonverbal communication,
Right.
like sarcasm or body language.
It's like they're missing some of those unspoken rules that most people kind of pick up on without even realizing it.
Right, exactly. And then for others, it might be that they struggle to express themselves verbally. Maybe they prefer written communication over spoken communication. It's really about recognizing that communication goes way beyond just the words themselves.
And I imagine those communication challenges can make it even harder to then navigate the social world, which is something that the sources really dove into.
Yeah, that social aspect can be really, really tricky for folks on the spectrum. Struggling to understand those unspoken rules, those social cues, forming those relationships and maintaining them.
It makes you realize how much we really do rely on those unspoken rules and those subtle cues.
We do in almost every interaction.
Yeah, in our day-to-day lives.
And when you don't pick up on that, it can be really isolating.
Right, especially in a world that can feel very socially demanding sometimes. So we've got these sensory sensitivities, we've got the communication challenges, we've got the social interaction struggles, and then the sources also touch on the fact that these often go hand in hand with other conditions, things like anxiety, depression, even gastrointestinal issues.
Mm.
Is there a connection there? What's going on?
It's an area where we need a lot more research, but some studies have shown a possible link between autism and the gut microbiome.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so we're talking about the trillions of bacteria that live in our digestive systems.
Okay, so our gut health could actually be impacting our brain development and function.
That's what it seems like.
That's wild.
It's pretty fascinating, and it shows just how complex this all is. It can be tough to separate what's directly caused by autism and what might be coming from these co-occurring conditions.
It's like this giant puzzle where all the pieces are interconnected.
Mhm.
And we've been talking a lot about the challenges, which are really important to understand. But these sources also made it really clear that autism is so much more than just a list of difficulties. There are some incredible strengths and talents that often come with it.
Oh, absolutely. Many autistic people have an incredible eye for detail, a strong sense of justice, and, that kind of unique way of seeing the world that can lead to amazing creativity and innovation.
Yeah. One source even mentioned that many on the spectrum are drawn to entrepreneurial pursuits. Why do you think that is?
It's a great question. It could be that autonomy that comes with being your own boss. Maybe it's the ability to structure your work environment to kind of minimize that sensory overload or that laser focus. It
Yeah.
seems like a lot of autistic individuals have that laser focus. So, it can be this perfect storm that leads to a lot of success.
Right, because it's not about fitting into a predefined mold. It's about saying, okay, what are my strengths and how do I create a path that works for me? Which actually reminds me of something else that stood out from these articles, those unique challenges faced by women and girls with autism.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like that's an area where we still have a lot to learn. Why do you think that is? It really does feel like women and girls on the spectrum kind of face this unique set of challenges. And it starts with this, the sources all pointed to this idea that they're frequently underdiagnosed
Mm-hmm.
or misdiagnosed even. Why do you think that is?
It seems like it often boils down to those classic signs, those things we think of when we think of autism are very much based on how it presents in boys.
All right.
So girls might be better at camouflaging. Maybe they're better at kind of masking those social difficulties, or maybe their special interests align more with what we consider typical for girls.
Which actually makes me think of this term high masking that a few of the sources brought up. It sounds almost like acting in a way.
It can feel like that for a lot of women on the spectrum. They learn how to observe and mimic those social behaviors that come
Mm.
naturally to others, they might suppress their natural responses when they're feeling overloaded. And it's almost like they're creating this whole persona to navigate, the neurotypical world.
Wow, yeah. That just sounds incredibly draining. Like you're always on.
Exactly. And it can work. It can be a really effective coping mechanism, but it comes at a cost. And that can look like delayed diagnosis,
Right.
burnout, exhaustion. It can even mask their true strengths, their passions, because they're so busy trying to fit in.
That's heartbreaking. And it's often happening so silently. Like people don't even realize the effort that's going into it.
Hmm.
Really highlights the need for not just, raising awareness, but providing those support systems that are really tailored to the needs of women and girls on the spectrum.
Absolutely. We need more research. We need more resources, more open conversations about how differently autism can look, especially for women.
Yeah. And speaking of support, these sources really emphasize the importance of not just self-advocacy, which is so important, but actually seeking outside support.
Right.
And not just for the individuals on the spectrum, but for their families as well.
Yeah. Support is crucial. And it's going to look different for everyone. Maybe it's therapy, maybe it's support groups, educational resources, or even just having that network, right?
Right, like friends and family who get it.
Yeah, people who get excited about your special interests or are cool with you taking a break when the environment's too much.
Right, that understanding.
Exactly, it can make all the difference.
Because at the end of the day, everyone on the spectrum, off the spectrum, we just want to feel seen, heard, and valued for who we are.
I love that. And that's what these sources really highlight. It's about like ditching the labels
Right.
and appreciating this beautiful complexity of the human brain.
Absolutely. Understanding autism, it isn't about checking boxes or memorizing facts. It's about opening yourself up to different ways of seeing the world, experiencing the world, interacting with the world.
And this deep dive, it's a fantastic start to that journey.
It is. And before we wrap up, one last thing for everyone listening to ponder. A few of these sources talked about this shift from the puzzle piece to the rainbow infinity symbol as a way to represent autism awareness. So we're curious, what are your thoughts on that? Which one resonates more with you and why?